Hey everybody, I promised I would do a video on thesis statements, so let's get to it. Here we are talking about analytical thesis statements, which act a little differently than the argumentative thesis that we'll be talking about in the next unit, our final unit. So let's take a look. Ooh, fancy. What kind of essay is your assignment? So part of what goes into writing a thesis is really understanding what your assignment is, understanding what is being asked of you in your assignment. And when you understand what you need to do, it makes the job a lot easier. If you don't understand what you're supposed to do, then you can be kind of lost. So you're being asked to do an audience analysis. It's a rhetorical analysis, but we're being even a little bit more specific and focusing on one part of the rhetorical situation. So let's talk a little bit about what an analysis is. In order to write an analysis, you need to have an understanding of the thing that you're analyzing. So this means you're breaking it down, information or artifacts, into the component parts. So with the rhetorical analysis, most rhetorical analysis papers are breaking a text down into its various elements, the rhetorical elements that go into it. In this essay, we are breaking it down into just the audience, right? Of course, we also are uncovering relationships among those parts. Again, we are focusing on the relationship of the audience to the writing piece that we've read. Next, we're determining motives, causes, and underlying assumptions. Why did the author choose to write for that audience? What do you think the author is trying to get? What kind of an effect do they want from an audience? That kind of thing. And then making inferences and finding evidence to support generalizations. So for this, you're actually going into the essay that you've read and that you've chosen to analyze, and you're going to use quotations from the text itself to help support your assertions. So that's what goes into an analysis. So here we're doing an audience analysis. As I said, you're being asked to analyze one part of the rhetorical situation, the audience. And the assignment asks you to identify two potential audiences. You are then asked to use quotes from the essay as evidence to support your claim. And then your thesis should then state something about these audiences that you chose. So how can you go about writing an effective thesis statement that does all the things that it's supposed to do to keep your audience interested and get them to read through the rest of the paper? Well, effective thesis statements do several things. They let your readers know the purpose and content of your writing. They also provide a focus for you as a writer. And so what you're doing in a thesis statement is stating your side of an issue, your perspective, the way that you see things. So it's best to avoid the first person by saying things like "I believe" and "in my opinion," because those kind of phrases really weaken your writing. They really don't have any place for in your thesis statement at all. The thesis statement, especially effective ones, also will preview the ideas that you're going to explore in the body of your essay, and they make a claim that somebody could dispute. So, for example, if you think that Nancy Mears is writing to people with 3 eyes and 4 legs, somebody might dispute you, right? But if you can find evidence within the essay that supports that, then you're going to make your case. So that's the whole point of a thesis statement. And it's important to remember that thesis statements are not questions. Instead, they are answers to questions that you're asking yourself in your head, right? Who is the audience? Why does it matter? Those are questions that you should be thinking, and your thesis statement will be the answer to those questions. So let's talk a little bit about analytical thesis statements. There are 3 questions that you should be asking yourself when you're formulating your analytical thesis statement. The first one is what? What is the claim? What are you actually stating, right? What audiences do you think the writer is trying to reach? Another question is, so what? Why should your reader care? Why do you care? So what? You need to answer those questions. And then lastly, which isn't quite as important in this this type of essay that we're doing, is how. How is that claim supported? How are you going to argue your claim in the body of the paper? That's not always necessary, but I put that in there because some people are can really craft a good thesis statement. Excuse me, I am quite froggy. So here are some suggestions for building a thesis. So let's take a look at the what. What is your simple answer to the prompt that you've been given? Remember, we were being asked to analyze the audience, 2 audiences, 2 possible audiences. So what audiences are you claiming the author is intending to reach? Then you're going to write this answer out for yourself. And this is something we'll actually be doing as an in-class activity. So if you want to, after I get through these points, if you want to pause the video and write these things out for yourself, you can do that. And then come back for the rest of the presentation. So let me continue on. The so what? Why should your readers care about those audiences you have claimed the author is writing for? Why do you care about your position? What does the reader gain from your position? So if you have any of those questions or some combination of them, those can help you determine the so what or the relevance of your position. So you will write that answer out for yourself that best fits your topic. And then lastly, the how, which of course isn't vital for a thesis statement for this paper, but it's nonetheless something that you really should still be thinking about because it helps you with the body of your essay. So what quotations will you use to prove your position? Think about the common threads that connect the evidence that you plan to use to prove your claim. And I want you to also consider your evidence from an analytical perspective and try to characterize how this evidence helps you to prove your position. And to answer that question, how will you prove this claim? So then you would write that answer for yourself. And as I said here, there's a note, the how part really won't play into the building up your thesis for this essay, but you can still answer those questions for yourself as you are drafting. So I've come up with a couple of templates. I'm not completely pleased with them, but they may be a way for you to work your way into a stronger thesis. This is not a magic formula. It's just for a working thesis. So some ideas are starting with the signal phrase in the essay, and you would put the title of the essay and then state the author's last name if you've already mentioned them by name before. In the essay blank, so-and-so addresses these audiences in order to call attention to X, suggest that X is blank, blah, 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 whatever. This answers the question, so what, right? Why should I care about those audiences? Well, because the author is trying to call attention to a certain issue, right? With Nancy Mayers, she's trying to call attention to how disabled people are represented in the media. So something along those lines, right? The audiences are similar, different, logical, etc., because the author wishes to call for a change, make a point about X, etc. I took this from the prompt that says you should make some kind of value judgment regarding the audiences. I'm not too keen on that, but if you want to try that, maybe it'll work for you. The author effectively addresses the audience by using logos, pathos, ethos, and using a formal, casual, or serious tone. If you want to go in that direction and do more of an analysis of how the author uses rhetorical appeals and how they're their voice and their tone, their writing style reaches a particular audience, you could definitely use this one as a template for a working thesis. So let's look at making a thesis statement substantive, grounded, and assertive. These are 3 characteristics that make for a really good thesis statement. So what the heck is substantive? Well, you want it to be substantial, right? You want it to be meaning something. So you need to convince the readers that they will learn something interesting and worthwhile. This helps to get the reader's attention. It piques their curiosity. So you want to think to yourself, what is the main point you are trying to communicate? Why does it matter? What's at stake? So what, right? Why should I care? What's at stake? You also want your thesis statement to be grounded. So if you can use logos in your thesis statement and point to facts and statistics and figures and evidence, that can be really helpful. It helps to make it convincing. So you want to think about the why and the how there, right? How is it going to make a difference? Lastly, you want it to be assertive. You want to state your point firmly. You want to state it clearly. So that means avoiding phrases like in my opinion, I think, or I believe. Those just make it wishy-washy. It really weakens your thesis, and you really want your thesis to be assertive because that has an effect on your reader. So let's look at some examples here. And of course, in class, I would be soliciting some responses from your classmates. So here we have weak theses. Why are they weak? And then strong theses. How are they improved? So let's start with the first one. Relaxing is important for good health. I always ask the question afterwards. So what? Right? So what? Does it tell me anything that I should care about? Not really. I mean, okay, yeah, it's a statement of fact, but it's not really, I may be able to debate it a little bit. Maybe I don't think relaxing is important for good health. So how could it be improved? Well, relaxation teaches the body and mind to rest, which improves sleep. See how that has improved? They're answering the question, how? Relaxation teaches the body to mind and rest. How, right? This is how and what. And then why, which improves sleep. Why should I care? Well, because everybody wants improved sleep. We don't want crappy sleep. So that's an improvement. The second example, people who don't go to college will never amount to anything. Well, this could certainly turn off a reader who has never been to college or doesn't intend to go to college. They may be quite offended, especially if they made something of themselves without having to go to college, right? This is quite an opinion. Doesn't really do much. So let's see how it can be improved. People who don't go to college may struggle to find employment with advancement opportunities. Says a totally different thing, right? It is now arguing something to prove a point that college can help people find better employment with advancement opportunities rather than, you know, just a job at the local McDonald's. Although there's advancement opportunities at McDonald's too. You can become managers and do their training. So I'm not poo-pooing that. Here's the last one. In my humble opinion, there are too many students dropping out of high school, and the community should be taking action to prevent this from happening. So the error here is this phrase, in my humble opinion, right? Because that suddenly weakens it. This is an assertive thesis statement. There are too many students dropping out, states topic, right? And the community should be doing something. You know, that's, yes, something should be done. So how could this be improved so it's not quite so Our community should start a mentoring program to prevent high school students from dropping out. So here it says the community should do something. And what should they do? They should do this. in order to stop students from dropping out. Why should I care? Because I don't want students dropping out from school. You see where I'm going there? Hopefully. So let's look at some strategies and best practices. You want to include a topic and your view or position on the topic in your thesis statement. You have to combine those two things to make an effective thesis. You also want to be assertive. We just went over this. Strive to write a clear and concise one-sentence thesis, which can be difficult, so that your reader will be able to easily identify the main idea and the purpose for your writing. If they can't identify your main idea, chances are they're going to lose interest fairly quickly. And we don't want that. You want to locate your thesis statement as close to the beginning of the paper as possible within your introductory paragraph. Usually at the end of the introductory paragraph. There are some students who can get away with having a thesis in the paragraph right after the introduction. And usually it's those students who have written a very strong introductory paragraph to begin with, and then decide to transition into the next paragraph with their thesis statement and then really expand on that thesis. So it's a different way of crafting, but it's not wrong, just so you know. You want to make your thesis substantive, right? It needs to be interesting, original, insightful. You want your reader to want to read all the way to the end of your paper. You don't want to lose them in the first minute. It also needs to be grounded, so that you need to choose supporting details that are relevant, specific, persuasive, and logical. I love logic. And then if you could do so without it becoming too wordy or too long, include in your thesis statement the key points you plan to discuss in your essay. However, it's not necessary. It will give your reader an idea for your essay's organization, but it isn't necessary. It's not, you must do it this way. It's another way to enter into doing a thesis statement, but it's not requirement. And avoid making an announcement in your thesis statement. Don't begin with the phrase such as, "In this paper, I will." Instead, I simply want you to just state your point. Just write it. Don't announce it. And I've told you that time and again. I don't like to see that. "In this paper, I will." It makes me cringe. And of course, avoid using the first person I in your thesis statement. We want you to use third person throughout your essay when you're not doing a narrative. So we're switching from, your first person narrative now to third person, more solid academic writing. It's quite a difference from our first essay to our second essay. So this is something that you'll need to get used to. All right, let's take a break here. I'll stop the sharing. And so if you have any questions about thesis statements, I'll be happy to answer them for you and help you with them. And, hopefully I'll be reading your rough drafts and giving you some pointers before you do the discussion board assignment. I'm hoping that the discussion board assignment will be that you write a revised thesis statement. Not required, but if I've given you feedback and you want to revise your thesis statement, by all means do that and post the revision to the discussion board, and then you can get some feedback from your peers. Hopefully we have some discussion going there. All right. Have a good week, everyone.